Hi, this is Arya Green, and we're back on Radio Melitz with Tales of the Trail. This time I'm not in my pajamas, but I am still indoors. The weather is still up and down iffy here in the Jerusalem Hills, Beit Shemesh, where I live. And I promise the next segment from Tales of the Trail will be outdoors. So although you can hear some dogs barking, I think, in the background from my neighbors. If you followed along in the last few segments, I recorded some out in the garden, and I recorded one or two now indoors. And because of Corona restrictions and now inclement weather. But I do hope that the next segment I'll be able to record outdoors, perhaps even on the trail. So we're at Tales of the Trail. This is segment 5, if I'm not mistaken. We're still following the theme of desert experiences. We're now into the 3rd week of the trail, and we'll talk a bit more about acceptance and then move on to one of the really, really powerful lessons that I learned on the trail, gratitude. Before we do, just to set the stage, if you haven't been following, so this is a series of a number of different radio and video programs which I was invited to give to share with you some of the experiences and lessons learned while hiking the Israel National Trail by Radio Melitz, by the folks at the Melitz Educational Institution, Rav Ori Ayalon and Ami Infeld, and I'm very grateful for the chance to share these experiences with you. And if you're listening on the radio, but you prefer, you can click on the video links to the YouTube versions, because although I describe on the radio some of the things that we see, obviously, since we're talking about hiking the Israel Trail and through the length and breadth of the land of Israel, certainly I'm delighted if you'll join me in a vicarious walk through the land of Israel by being able to see also the photos and occasional videos that I also share. But as a way of, I don't know what the word is, background, yeah, to set the stage to a certain extent, because that's an important element of the series. If you haven't been with us before, then I want to share with you at least the basic elements of the thread of the story that we're discussing. And so I'm showing and talking and discussing basically the themes that I pursue in the book My Israel Trail, which is the story of my hike on the Israel Trail and healing from a devastating divorce, which was not of my choosing, meeting my personal challenges by hiking the Israel Trail and finding some sense of inner peace while hiking the trail. I did the trail in 8 weeks with a 50-pound, 25-kilo pack on my back. I did it all alone. And actually today we'll be going a little bit into some of the experiences I had when I wasn't alone on the trail. It was quite a challenge, as you can imagine, for a 51-year-old. 8 weeks of walking and hiking and trudging through deserts, as well as forests in the north or what have you, alone. The trail itself winds its way, as those of you who are watching in the video can see from the map, through the Negev desert, and then up through the hills of Jerusalem, along the coastal plain, as it were, and along the coast, and then through the Galil up to the border with Lebanon. Today we're going to be walking with me, as it were, through an area which is less well known of the northern Negev, called the, well, we'll get to it in a little bit. But one of the things that, aside from the desert beauty of the different caverns, mountains, canyons, and different colors of the desert, which I described previously, the different shades of brown, gray, black, light brown, the stratas that you can see. If you're watching, you can see the picture. If you're listening on the radio, looking at the different lines and stratas of earth and granite, rock and sand in the Negev desert is a different kind of beauty. I mean, it's not the forests of California that I grew up in, but it's a beautiful stunning landscape. And of course, I don't say this enough in these programs, but I would recommend and invite anybody who hasn't done so to take, you know, if to hike the entire trail, but to take a day, take a half a day to see some of these really unique parts of Israel, which usual visitors don't necessarily take the time to become familiar with. But one of the things for me that developed over that third week of hiking through the Israel Trail and moving into the northern Negev was a growing sense of appreciation that I developed. First of all, I just obliquely referred to the fact, well, I didn't refer to the fact of my preference, but I referred to the issue of forests in the north, or California pine forests. I have always been somebody who loves mountains, trees, lush, verdant valleys, the coastline of California and of Israel. I've never really been much of a desert person, and for me, hiking through the desert in Israel really opened my eyes to that beauty that I referred to just now. But there's more to it. I've discussed in earlier segments my connection with our people, with the ancestral connection that we have as a Jewish people with the desert. Not only wandering 40 years in the desert after the Exodus of Egypt, but within the context of settling the land, a lot of it was desert within the context of a lot of our prophetic experiences, which I'll come back to shortly. But one of the things that I developed in walking those first few weeks was not only an increased sense of appreciation for the beauty of the desert, but the lesson of the importance of gratitude was one that I really took home very, very powerfully. I mean, the funny thing is, the children of Israel complain in the desert frequently. I mean, it distressed Moshe Rabbeinu, it distressed Moses, the lack of gratitude for the miracles that were performed for them in the desert. And it actually provoked God's anger. And the truth is that our tefillot, our prayers, include gratefulness, even at commemorations of national disaster. I mean, and that kind of reflects a connection between the acceptance that I was discussing earlier, the acknowledgement of our relative powerlessness, and a great thankfulness for the wonders of the universe and the miracles in our lives. I mean, I'd always been a grateful sort of person. The trail basically enhanced and reinforced and reaffirmed kind of a deep sense of appreciation for virtually everything in my life. And that was basically the third lesson for me of the trail. And the truth is that there were things that I was so grateful for that you would think are mundane, but when you're out there hiking on the trail and you're all alone day after day after day, and in the quiet, all of these reflections and contemplations, there were things for which I was just incredibly grateful for. Walking in the course of a day and coming across a bird and hearing bird song after the silence of the desert, seeing a stunning view like the one that I've been showing now this is, if I remember correctly, Ma'ale Palmach in the northern desert. I remember it specifically, and I took this photo. I'm trying to pick a picture of a very small purple flower, just on the trail, near a trail sign, in the midst of the desert. I cried, and I'm not embarrassed. I'm one of those men who cries relatively easily. I cried when I saw these flowers, which is why I took the photo of them. It was the first bit of color that I had seen after 3 weeks, or 2.5 weeks, into the third week of trudging through the desert, which, although it was beautiful, and I have now said, I think, a number of times how beautiful the experience of the desert is, the lack of color was somewhat overwhelming. And although I very much enjoyed the experience of not just the silence and the quiet, but kind of lack of distraction, as it were, in the desert, I was really, really emotional in seeing that bit of color because it reminded me so much of the beauty that exists in the world. And so going from the very, very stark, almost harsh experience of the colorless grays and browns of being out in the desert to the color of flowers once again, really reminded me of how grateful I am for all of the incredible things in my life. And so to, in a certain way, it kind of gave me a perspective, which I suppose is a theme that I share frequently when talking about hiking on the trail, um, about how grateful I am for and was for so many parts of my life, my family, who were so supportive of me in the course of the difficult period that I was going through over the course of years, my friends, who also were incredibly supportive, and to a great degree, hiking the trail reminded me how much of a privilege it is to live in this era that we live in, with the return, the restoration of sovereignty of the people of Israel in the land of Israel, in this modern nation state of Israel. And the appreciation that I had for that was only enforced. I mean, I've always been very, very cognizant of how lucky we are to be living in this day and age. But it was reinforced by the hike, because I just felt every day the beauty and the experiences that I was going through every day on the trail, made me incredibly grateful for the privilege that I had to hike the trail. And that gratitude therefore extended to not just living in this day and age, but to the fact that financially I was able to, that I had the support not only of my family, but even of my employer at the time, Honest Reporting, that enabled me to take leave without absence for a few months to have this experience. Ironically enough, I even came, and we'll come back to this, I think, in a later segment. I came to an appreciation. No, came to is the wrong word. I acknowledged, recognized, and allowed myself to feel an ongoing and increasing appreciation and gratefulness, gratitude, even to my former wife, who obviously the pain and suffering that I was going through in her taking her decision to end the marriage, made that gratitude a little bit less easy perhaps to achieve, and we'll come back to that. But I was grateful. Of course, I remain grateful for the incredible home and family that we built, and the children that we had and raised, and the lives that we lived, the communities that we were part of. That appreciation was an important lesson that I learned while hiking. And I want to share with you one particular issue or experience or element of the gratitude that I had, because it's one of those things about the trail which most people are not so aware of unless they've had any real involvement with the trail. And that is something, a unique, I call it an institution, a unique phenomenon to Israel, to the Israel Trail. And that's called trail angels, Malachei HaShavil. And trail angels are people, like I'm showing a picture of Prince Nasik Emmanuel Ben Yehuda of the Hebrew Israelite nation, which is located or based in Dimona. They have members around the country, but their main center of operations and headquarters is in their little kibbutz called the Kibbutz Shalom, the Peace Village in Dimona. And I'm showing that picture because Nasik Emmanuel, Prince Emmanuel and Ben Yehuda, and his family and his community were one of the first to have hosted me as a trail angel while I was hiking. And if I talk about the places I visited, and the geography of Israel, the land of Israel, the history, the people I met on the trail were, without question, part of the story, both in terms of the uniqueness of the experience and the support and even love that I received while on the trail. So I'll come back to Dimona in a second, and to my experience of a Shabbat there. which also is very much related to issues of gratitude. But I want to talk for a second more about the issue of trail angels, because trail angels um, are, as I said, such a unique element of the Israel Trail. So there are other trails in the world, like the Appalachian Trail, which offers lean-tos, some sort of shelters, three-sided huts, which volunteers maintain. And normally there might be a mattress or a broom inside, but that's basically it. And I don't discount the importance of that if you're hiking the Appalachian Trail. I'm sure it's a welcome respite, whether it's from rain and snow or heat or animals or what have you. But in Israel, aside from the 2/3 of the nights in the trail, which I did spend out in the field, out camping out in night camps or in forests or what have you. The other third, I availed myself of the generosity of what are called trail angels. Now, these are people, they're families, they're students, sometimes they're kibbutzim, as actually the whole kibbutz or moshav, or communities like the Peace Village in Dimona of the Black Hebrews, who open up their homes, who provide a bed, shower, clean sheets. And for those of you on video as opposed to on audio, you can see, and if I didn't mention it earlier, you can click on the video link on the MelitzRadio website to go to these YouTube videos to see the pictures. Here, what we're looking at is a picture of a kind of a Bedouin tent in the backyard of Aryeh and Leah Schiff's home in Arad, the desert town of Arad, which was the first trail angel that actually stayed at. Now they erected this tent in their backyard in memory of their son Ofer, who was unfortunately killed in a car accident, because he was an avid hiker, and I came across a number of similar trail angels who erected similar memorials to their children, to kind of carry on their legacy. What you can see in the picture, if you're looking at the picture, is a kind of a Bedouin tent room, a bed and a fridge, and there's an outdoor kind of lean-to bathroom with a shower, toilet, and a sink outside of it. And what's important, even if you can't see the pictures, and it's true for this experience and for all the trail angels, is I said they'll offer a bed, and a shower. Often they'll do your laundry. They'll provide a meal, a hot cooked meal. They'll pick you up if necessary from the trailhead and take you back the next morning. And all of this is done for free, gratis, no payment required or even requested. And that's one of the elements that make it unique among any other trek around the world. You can't imagine having, or maybe you can, having spent weeks, days or weeks sleeping in a tent, and if you're washing at all, you're washing in a little sink or a little creek or what have you. The pinuk, as we say in Hebrew, the being spoiled by sheets or pillows or a warm shower or a home cooked meal, it can't be exaggerated. And the trail angels are something that I was, of course, immensely grateful for within the context of this lesson learned there in the desert. Even when I was up north and could sleep on a bed of pine needles in a forest, it was still an incredibly welcome thing when I had a shower to shower in or a home cooked meal or what have you. That was the third lesson of the three that I learned on the trail. And it was something which I explored with Prince Emmanuel ben Yehuda in the Black Hebrews Peace Village, because I spent a Shabbat with them. And the Shabbat I spent, simply coincidentally, but I don't believe in coincidences, happened to be the Shabbat of what they call their Shabbat of gratitude, which was for them a special Shabbat every year where they express their gratitude for all the privileges and all the gifts and all the benefits that they've received as a community from God and from humanity. And so I found myself, I was asked by Emmanuel to give a talk at the Friday night services, the tefillot, that they had. And that was an experience which I write about a bit in the book. The Black Hebrews spend Shabbat in a unique way with biblical roots, including having Shabbat services on Friday night with no electricity. Now, of course, that meant no air conditioning, but it also meant no lights. And so I found myself being called up to the podium to give a few minutes of a Dvar Torah, surrounded by candles, and being so warmly accepted by the community, which was kind of a cross between a traditional Shabbat service and a kind of barn-raising, singing, and really enthusiastic prayer service that you might find somewhere in America or what have you. It was very, very uplifting. And I shared with them some of my thoughts about gratitude, about acceptance, and also about humility and Moses in the desert, the children of Israel in the desert. And Prince Emmanuel, who himself had been divorced, and I spent all afternoon talking and walking through the paths of the village of their community. And it was a very special Shabbat, unique. In fact, I once thought about writing a book of the 7 different Shabbats that I spent hiking the trail over those 8 weeks, because each Shabbat could be described in its own story. But I will mention that their hospitality was phenomenal. As a vegetarian, I very much appreciated the vegan, delicious food that they prepared. The fact that they gave us food. One of the things that many people don't know is that they fast on Shabbat, which is not a normative Jewish practice in terms of our Jewish traditions, but they provide food for their guests who are staying with them, and it was delicious. And they did a lot of laundry for me, and I spent time with Emmanuel and his family. Again, just reinforcing that feeling of appreciation and gratitude for all of the benefits and gifts that I had received on the trail itself, let alone in my life. So I want to stop here, simply because we're running kind of towards the end of our time, and I want to leave. I'll give you a hint of where I'd like to go in the next segment. I want to leave for the next segment our the feeling of, or the putting together of so many different elements of my experience there in the desert, in a very specific and special prayer situation, which I can just say combines the issues of humility and acceptance and gratitude that I have previously discussed, in a very powerful both prayer and meditative practice that I developed in the Judean desert in that 3rd week of my trek. But I'll leave that for next time, sharing with you a few transitional elements. That was a quick mistake there, of moving from the Negev, the northern Negev, to from desert, as it were, into more forestry areas. But we'll leave that for next time. Thanks for joining us. This was Tales from the Trail with me, Ari Green, on Radio Melitz.